Good evening. It's Tuesday, the 10th of June, and here's what's making news around the world on World News Tonight. Manipur erupts. India imposes curfew and internet ban amidst ethnic tension. Conflict turns. Russia launches its biggest aerial attack on Ukraine. Chase concludes. Escaped zebra finally caught and airlifted to safety in Tennessee.
From Colombo, this is World News Tonight with Amarsha Fernando.
And welcome back. Indian authorities have enforced an indefinite curfew and suspended internet services across 5 Imphal Valley districts following violent protests triggered by the arrest of Arambai Tengal leaders. Restrictions aim to curb ethnic unrest between Meitei and Kuki communities as tensions escalate.
India's northeastern state of Manipur is once again grappling with serious unrest, forcing authorities to impose an indefinite curfew and shut down internet services across 5 key districts in the Imphal Valley. The move comes after the arrest of several leaders from the Meitei group Arambai Tengal, which ignited a wave of intense protest and public outrage. Demonstrators, many of them youth, took to the streets in defiance of restrictions, with some resorting to pouring petrol over themselves in acts of extreme desperation and protest. The situation has escalated tensions between the Meitei and Kuki communities, whose long-standing ethnic divisions continue to threaten peace in the region. As security forces remain on high alert, the government has appealed for restraint, emphasizing the need to maintain law and order. The internet blackout is aimed at curbing the spread of misinformation and preventing further mobilization, while political leaders and civil society groups call for dialogue and de-escalation. The state remains on edge, with uncertainty clouding the road ahead.
Tensions remain high as the US and China hold a second round of trade talks in London. Key issues include export controls on technology and rare earths, with both sides seeking common grounds in their ongoing economic standoff.
The United States and China held the second round of trade negotiations in London on Monday and discussed key issues to resolve the ongoing trade war between the two economic powerhouses. According to Bloomberg, the two sides concluded their first day of negotiations after holding talks for more than 6 hours. The first day of talks was centered on discussing export controls, specifically over shipments of technology and rare earth elements. The U.S. delegation was led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, while the Chinese delegation was led by Vice Premier He Lifeng. During the talks, the U.S. indicated willingness to partially lift technology export controls targeting China in exchange for the easing of restrictions on rare earth exports to the U.S. However, when asked about the talks between Washington and Beijing, U.S. President Donald Trump said while the U.S. is doing well in talks, China is not easy.
We are doing well with China. China's not easy, just like your home country is not easy, Dara. I think we're doing very well. They're over there now. I'm only getting good reports. It's a little early, but they'll be calling in soon. In fact, probably when I get back, I'll have my first call from them. We want to open up China, and if we don't open up China, maybe we won't do anything. But
the latest trade negotiations also stem from the differences in positions between the two countries over whether the two major economies violated the trade agreement reached in Geneva last month. At the time, the two sides agreed to drastically lower tariffs on each other's goods for an initial 90-day period. However, Washington claimed that Beijing violated the agreement. The U.S. says China has been reluctant to release exports of rare earth metals and magnets, while China says Washington restricted its access to U.S. goods such as semiconductors and AI technologies. With still much to be discussed between the two countries, officials plan to meet again at 10 a.m. on Tuesday for a second day of talks in London.
Ukraine and Russia initiated the largest prisoner exchange since the war's 2022 escalation on May 23, 2025, swapping 390 soldiers and civilians each, the first phase of a planned 1,000 for 1,000 agreement reached at Istanbul talks earlier that month.
Ukraine and Russia began the first stage of a multi-phase prisoner exchange, repatriating servicemen under the age of 25 following a humanitarian agreement reached during peace talks. On Monday, the first phase of a prisoner swap agreed on in Istanbul on June 2nd took place, involving young military prisoners and severely wounded individuals. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the exchange in his evening address, emphasizing a phased approach over several days and thanking all parties involved. Although specific numbers were undisclosed, both nations affirmed an equal exchange of prisoners. Despite conflicting claims over the exchange between the two nations the previous day, the exchange marks hope for broader negotiations aimed at exchanging at least 1,200 prisoners from each side and repatriating fallen soldiers.
Canada has evacuated over 30,000 people primarily from indigenous communities as wildfires rage across Manitoba. Residents from remote First Nations were airlifted to safety, with evacuees now housed in hotels and shelters, while officials warn of ongoing threats and logistical challenges.
Scores of wildfires have swept across Canada since the start of May, forcing more than 30,000 people to evacuate in 3 provinces. Although Indigenous people make up only around 5% of Canada's population, they are among the most affected by this year's wildfires. The fire evacuation effort is Manitoba's largest ever. Videos shared by residents showed military and civilian helicopters buzzing back and forth over the remote community of roughly 3,000 people. The helicopters landed on the school field as thick smoke enveloped the area and flames inched nearer. Dozens of people huddled inside a Chinook military helicopter. Indigenous leaders in Manitoba have criticized both federal and provincial governments for inadequate communication and delays during the wildfire crisis. Indigenous Services Canada, which managed the evacuation, said emergency response is a shared responsibility, and first response is generally up to local authorities. Manitoba's government said in an email that smoky conditions near Puckatawagan early in the emergency response prevented water bombers from providing vital air support. While early evacuees took shelter in Winnipeg, are among the roughly 2,000 people from Manitoba now staying in hotels in the Niagara Falls area in Ontario. A date to return home is uncertain.
In Los Angeles, escalating protests over federal immigration raids have prompted President Trump to deploy 700 Marines alongside 2,000 National Guard troops. California Governor Gavin Newsom has condemned the move, calling it a violation of state sovereignty.
Tonight, 700 Marines are on their way to the streets of Los Angeles to assist the National Guard and law enforcement tamp down violent clashes with protesters angry over the Trump administration's immigration policies and arrests. Over the past 72 hours, pockets of LA descending into chaos. Protesters setting cars on fire, dumping bikes and scooters on police cruisers on the highway. Law enforcement firing hundreds of flashbangs and non-lethal projectiles and making dozens of arrests. It got so heated in the streets that a British photographer needed emergency surgery after being struck by a non-lethal projectile.
Moving them on through the...
And there was this moment. Watch as a correspondent for 9 News Australia reporting on the protest when an officer hits her with a rubber pellet. And tonight, an escalating war of words between California Governor Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump. Newsom suing the president for creating the conditions for this chaos when he sidestepped California officials to deploy thousands of National Guard troops. Newsom then slammed by Trump and border czar Tom Homan for his response to the unrest. Homan initially suggesting the governor should be arrested, something Trump seemed to support just hours ago. Spontaneous clashes began Friday as federal agents conducted multiple operations in and around Los Angeles. By Saturday, protests, mostly peaceful, grew larger when agents were seen staging in nearby Paramount, California. And by Sunday, a convoy of heavily armed and camouflaged troops arrived.
Let's go in for a short commercial break. More world news coming right after this. And welcome back. The third UN Ocean Conference has officially opened in Nice, France, co-hosted by France and Costa Rica. With the theme Accelerating Action and Mobilizing All Actors, it aims to fast-track SDG 14, ratify the High Seas Treaty and boost ocean governance.
The summit, gathering heads of state, scientists and advocates, is meant to cover climate change, pollution, biodiversity and making humanity's access to marine resources more sustainable. One of the shared goals of the French government was to convince enough states to ratify the High Seas Treaty, adopted by the United Nations in 2023, for it to come into effect. The pact is seen as a crucial tool to meet a target to protect 30% of the Earth's land and sea by 2030, known as 30 by 30. The UNOC3 runs from Monday till Friday this week.
12 activists, including climate campaigner Greta Thunberg, were intercepted in international waters by Israeli naval forces while attempting to breach the Gaza blockade aboard the yacht Madeleine. They were seized, taken to Ashdod, and are now being deported amidst legal and humanitarian disputes.
Israeli naval forces boarded and seized a charity vessel trying to break a naval blockade of the war-torn Gaza Strip on Monday. The British-flagged yacht, Madeleine, operated by the pro-Palestinian Freedom Flotilla Coalition, was aiming to deliver a symbolic amount of aid to Gaza and raise international awareness of the humanitarian crisis there. However, the FFC said on Telegram the boat was boarded during the night before it could reach shore. The boat, with its crew of 12, including Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, is now heading to a port in Israel. The Israeli Foreign Ministry later confirmed it was under Israeli control. Videos released by passengers on board the vessel showed an unidentified white substance covering the deck and windows.
Right now they're jamming our call.
They also said Israeli forces had disrupted their communication lines.
Just to jam our communication.
The Israeli Foreign Ministry wrote on X the, quote, selfie yacht of the celebrities is safely making its way to the shores of Israel. The passengers are expected to return to their home countries. The ministry later added that all passengers were safe and unharmed. They were provided with sandwiches and water. The show is over, it said. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz ordered the military on Sunday to prevent the Madeleine from reaching Gaza, calling the mission a propaganda effort in support of Hamas. Hamas condemned the seizure of the boat as state terrorism. Israel imposed a naval blockade on the coastal enclave in 2007 to stop weapons from reaching the Hamas militant group, designated as a terrorist organisation by Israel and the West. The blockade has remained in place through multiple conflicts, including the current war. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territories has supported the operation and on Sunday urged other boats to challenge the Gaza blockade.
Colombian presidential nominee Miguel Uribe Turbay was critically wounded in a Bogota campaign rally shooting. The attack, condemned by President Petro, has sparked national outrage and concerns over candidate security ahead of upcoming elections, deepening national tensions and political tensions across the country.
Tonight, a Colombian presidential candidate is fighting for his life after an assassination attempt in the nation's capital. New video shows the horrifying moment a shooter in the crowd at a campaign event in Bogota pulls out a gun and shoots 39-year-old Senator Miguel Uribe in the head. People heard crying out in anguish they killed him before Uribe was rushed to the hospital. Doctors say he remains in critical condition after undergoing brain surgery.
Arizona, Estados Unidos.
Authorities arrested a 15-year-old suspect at the scene who, according to the Attorney General's office, was armed with a 9mm pistol that had been legally purchased in Arizona. Uribe, a member of the right-wing Democratic Center Party, has pledged to crack down on violence across the Latin American nation.
Si luchamos juntos, vuelve la seguridad.
Announcing his intention to run for president last October from the location where he says his mother, a journalist, was kidnapped kidnapped by Pablo Escobar's cartel and later killed in a rescue operation in 1991 during one of Colombia's darkest chapters with drug cartel violence. Uribe is also the grandson of Julio Cesar Turbay, who served as the president of Colombia from 1978 to 1982. He's been a vocal critic of leftist President Gustavo Petro, who is term limited and not eligible to run in next May's election. This weekend, Petro condemned the attack and called for a thorough investigation. Meanwhile, supporters were seen gathering outside Uribe's hospital, praying for his recovery as a nation still haunted by political violence of the past recovers from the present.
Let's go in for a short commercial break. More world news coming right after this. And welcome back. San Francisco's Mr. Bloom suits up to sow native wildflowers across underused urban spaces, flicking seeds of Parmesan shaker to support dwindling bee populations. His grassroots mission, shared widely online, aims to revitalize pollinators and urban green corridors.
In a city where you can see just about anything, a man in a bee suit on a one-wheeler still manages to turn heads. It may look like a plea for attention, and it is, just not from humans, because Shalico McGee is trying to attract bees.
When I see weeds, I plant seeds. Sprinkle, sprinkle.
He calls himself Mr. Bloom, and his job is to pollinate the forgotten corners of the city using an old Parmesan shaker filled with native wildflowers, a kind that makes San Francisco bees feel right at home. It started with a simple idea: beautify the city and bring back the bees. But somewhere between the sidewalk and the seed tosses, it took root.
Oh, check this out.
Before long, his social media account started blooming too, with nearly 1 million followers watching the city come back to life, and not a moment too soon. A recent report shows bees aren't buzzing like they used to, with more than 22% of native pollinators in North America at an elevated risk of extinction. Still, not everyone's on board with his approach, and while he may not have a permit, so far, no one's told him to buzz off.
A zebra on the run in Tennessee captured national attention. After evading capture for a week, Ed was finally caught by a Texas team using nets and a helicopter, bringing an adventurous chapter in suburban wildlife to a dramatic close.
All good things must come to an end. Just ask Ed. The escaped zebra had been running around Tennessee for a week before he was finally caught. But local residents weren't exactly cowering in their homes in fear. Ed got loose from his stable and went on the run with trackers hot on his trail. The zebra proved to be elusive. When local resources failed to bring him in after nearly a week, his owners reportedly called in a team from Texas to track him down, trap him with a net, and then airlift him to safety. The Rutherford County Sheriff's Office had been tracking and reporting sightings of Ed on social media. They were also happy to share the video of him being flown back to his owners, who report that he's in good health after being checked out by a vet. No word if Ed has learned his lesson, but if he does attempt another escape, it's probably because he wants another helicopter ride.
Apple unveils new AI features aimed at enhancing everyday user experiences, including live translations and image generation via ChatGPT. The modest update focuses on practical tools and design changes, signaling a cautious but strategic approach to artificial intelligence integration. And with that, we come to the end of today's edition of World News Tonight. With the hopes of seeing you again, I'm Marsha Fernando, and we leave you tonight with the visuals of Berlin celebrating the Festival of Cultures with vibrant color, sound and dance. Also, don't forget to send us your feedback through email at feedback.ad24english@derana.lk or via WhatsApp at 076 805 7933. Thank you for watching and have a great night.